The issue is West Asia and what we see now. Methodologically speaking, I believe we have to break our discussion in three parts. One is where we stand, how we read the situation. The second is why we are here, and based on that, where we go and what should we do. I try to put my reading about the situation in a very short, a few minutes. First of all, when you talk about Middle East, in general, you have an identity crisis there. No one really knows where Middle East is, where is the boundary. No one really claims that I'm Middle Eastern. You know, I'm from Iran, somebody's from Saudi, but no one says I'm Middle Eastern. So you have the problem now there. And when you say really Arab League is silent, this is also a part of this crisis, I mean identity crisis. No one really knows what should we do and should to do. So that's the first point. The second point is really terrorism, which I believe Iran has a very good experience how to deal with terrorism. Possibly this is one reason why Iran is there, that everybody after a long time argues that Iran is not part of problem, it is part of solution. That comes from the experience of dealing with the terrorism. Possibly suicide killing was first time introduced in Iran by some terrorist group which are sanctuared in Western countries. So we do have that experience. Where we see now terrorism, possibly if you think the expression or metaphor which was used by George Bush after 9/11, he called terrorism with global reach. That's really materialized now. It means terrorism is everywhere. No one can say that I'm immune of a group of Daesh. And you know, many people are rethinking, let's say, until 3 or 4 months ago, many people thought that, Kurdistan is being, you know, independent. Now Kurdish people are coming to Iran and say, okay, let's help, we don't want that. You know what I'm saying? So these are, this tells you that how the things are. I very much remember if you would talk about 30 years back about terrorism, you could argue terrorism from below, terrorism from top, and lastly talking about international terrorism. But now with what you see in Iraq and Syria, really this is a new, absolutely new phenomenon. It's not something called terrorism from below. It's not terrorism from top. It's not international. Even further than terrorism, terrorism of global terrorism of global reach. The competency and capability of terrorism is to say that, you know, they are in a point that they are not really a group in a sense. They are a strategic group that they can shift and can change the status quo in the Middle East. They can change border, they can change regime, and all those, you know, this tells you how, you know, capable they are. And the functionality is to change order. I mean, when it says change order, I mean international even structure of the structure of international system also is the aim of the group. Their technique and tactic is absolutely different than the past. And very much I remember when we studied about terrorism, you know, always you would say, okay, keep them distance from media. Because there, at that time, the terrorist group are very much try to have access to the media to say what we want, where we are. Today, all of these, you know, issues have gone. Everything is in their hand. There is no talk about terrorist group that say, okay, I want to have access in the media. It's because of, you know, so many things. So the way they act also very much different, very much complicated. Organizationally speaking, The point is that due to globalization, they do not need solid organization like what we had in the time of Cold War from terrorist group, there is no need absolutely to have a strong, solid organization at all. When it comes to the leadership also, no one could say, okay, we have to see what bin Laden says or what Ayman Zawahiri says, that this group come to the street, come and commit terrorist group. That's not really the case because, the leadership also, so the pocket of different group can do many things, and then it comes who has created this. That's really an issue, but right now I don't think it is important because those who have created them also, they are endangered, This Daesh group is claiming to have Kaaba also, so this means, no one is immune even if somebody is. Ideology is very important, Most important issue in the past was, okay, what is the ideology of terrorist group? Here I should say two things should be separated. One is particularism, and there is universalism and also particularism. Universality is that all of them come from a specific school of thought, a very minor, teeny minor of Sunni, which is not even all Wahhabism. So that's particularism is there. A certain sect of, Sunnite group, which everybody knows that's universalism. But particularism comes when you go to, Taliban in Afghanistan, is this type of jihadism plus tribalism. When you go to Iraq, it is this jihadism plus the remnants of Saddam Hussein. So you're talking about Ba'athist ideology, which is, no one can say this is a nationalistic ideology plus jihadism ideology. It is a combination. So Europeans should be very much scared because when it comes to Europe, that universalism will bring some particularism also there. That might go even to the U.S., everywhere. And it doesn't mean that you should have a big community of Muslims, that this threat should be targeted to you. A small community is enough. Even if you don't have, Muslim community, this doesn't mean that you're immune of that. So this is one way. Fundamentally speaking, this is not a conflict. This is not a war between Shia and Sunni. I tell you this as an expert. I tell you this as somebody who has done research, field study in Saudi Arabia for 8 years to see how the things, absolutely it is not a conflict between Shia and Sunni. So these premises or assumption behind the mind of the people in the world that talk about Shia-Sunni conflict, that assumption is absolutely wrong. I have thousands of questionnaires to prove this idea. So that's one point, which is terrorism. The second point is, you're talking about, sovereignty, state sovereignty. Absolutely, state sovereignty in the Middle East, if you call it Middle East, is being eroded, strongly eroded from both within and also from outside, It's not intervention, military intervention of Americans, globalization and all the other subjects, from outside. So this state sovereignty is really under the question now within the region. The merges between state and non-state factor is very important. Really, no one can say now in the Middle East whether it is the state which makes the decision or is non-state which is making the decision. And for sure, really, no one knows whether the problem that we have now can be solved by the state per se or not. It is very much difficult to answer. Absolutely for sure, no single state in the universe can claim that I'm going to solve this issue. That's not the case. That's the minimum one can say. The legitimacy of a state is really also important. As you know, legitimacy in our region is, if you call it territorial legitimization, because of, oil, because of natural resources, and so many other things, and underdevelopment of the political systems in the region. Territory has become a source of legitimization. Now, this is a very big question, whether still that element plays a role to call it, a source of legitimization of a state or not. So that's my last point, which is, the legitimization. The relation between nation and state is really another question. Usually you will have four type of relation: nation-state, state-nation, multi-nation state, or part-nation state, No one can really say what is the situation in Iran. Mostly it is a state-nation, because the political culture of shaping a state comes from outside. It is dictated by somebody from outside, or by the state, by the government. So nation is really very much distant from the government. The thing is that fundamentally nation building is very important factor in the region. You do not have that many established state in principle in our region, except, let's say, Egypt, Iran, Turkey, and others. So this process of nation building is a very, very long process. No one really can tell you where Middle East stands when it comes to the process of nation building. So that's important. These are some of the issues. This is my description of what I see in the region, and then why is so. Historically speaking, the failure and the collapse of Ottoman Empire was a factor. It was supposed to introduce a modern state to the Middle East, to our region. But instead of modern state, a colonial state was introduced to the region. And that possibly is one of the root cause of the problem: the border, the type of regime, the government, or whatever you say. Then I put, globalization as a very important factor. Globalization, I believe, in general, is a positive process, but at the same time, it has some negative and dark side. And that dark side, unfortunately, is mainly for our region. So the dark side of globalization can be, the terrorism that we talk about. When I say about organization, leadership, debate, is really a dark side of globalization. Our region, is very much behind when it comes to globalization. Positive result of globalization, especially when you talk about economy, when you talk about political participation, and all those kind of things. They are really negative aspect of globalization. So that's when you think about, sociologically speaking about our region. Also, a few points are very important. Democratically speaking, if I term the expression which was used by late Huntington, this region is exception of democracy. And some other scholar call it, the whole region is exception when it comes to the level of sociology. Why is this exception for the region? When it came Arab Spring, some people optimistically said this is the globalization of democracy. But now we see it is democratization, it is globalization of crisis. And it's not a globalization of democracy. Arab Spring is Arab, crisis. No more spring, not even Ottoman. So that's really one way to see. So one problem that we have of the cause of these issues that I say, it's really this concept of rentier state. Many states in our region are rent. When you have a rentier state, you do not have institution of taxation. And when you do not have this institution of taxation, you don't have any responsible, accountable government there. If there is not accountable government there, it means you are killing democracy. It means you are putting the society in a very unproductive society. That's what you see prevailing in our region. The societies are not really productive. The cultural factor also is there, and that, patrimonial way of thinking culturally, political culture, this is a traditional way of understanding politics in our region. That factor is there. The authoritarian reading of Islam in some of these countries by some of the states is very important factor in where we see, all this. Exceptionality of the region is not that all these factors there. Many other regions also do have the same factor. But the way all these factors have come together made this region to be exceptional, and that's fundamental, problem. All these factors on them. When you do not have, you do not have civil institutions, then you see what happens after revolution, in Egypt, and that is because of the of a state type of colonization, which I said, and all of this is in the context of globalization. When you have rentier structures, you cannot, implement the minimum claims that a state that has promised to its people. Distribution function is a factor which many states had promised to the people. Participatory function, all of this has failed by the governments there. That's why you see unrest, all of them.
Yeah. It's very fascinating what you are saying.
Yeah, I'm finishing.
Time factor.
Yeah.
Complete it in a couple of minutes.
Okay, I will do it in a couple of minutes, yeah. And of course, Arab countries have not been able to solve the issues, the fundamental issues in their foreign policy, and the shift in class in all the society because of the new money which comes from money. This brings a new, Middle East class. That also. The problems that they have in Arab Spring, one is Islamic fundamentalism, the lack of so many institutions, and so what should we do? I just go straight to what should we do? Very few points. First of all of us should look at the thing in a strategic manner. I do think, look at the very, very large picture to understand where we stand. I tell you one point. It was, I think, about 19 years ago, through some of this track to diplomacy which I had with our friends Americans, I told them the way you deal Taliban, the real consequence would be Talibanization of entire region. Now, after 18, 19 years, they are asking me, okay, what should we do at that time if we wanted to? And I said, okay, if you take off this glass of bringing Iran as a threat and, securitization of Iran to the world, if you would take off this glass and lens, you would easily come to conclusion that I had at that time. And this is what I really mean when I say we have to have, to look at the large picture. So that's the first point. The second point is, as I said, no single state can claim that I can solve the problem. Not even a group of government possibly can do. So it's a responsibility of everybody. The third point is that you should differentiate between two things, causes and the reason. of this, what we see in the region. You know, it's very important to think about this philosophical point. When you talk about reason, you are talking about idea and ideology, Islam and whatever, and the other reasons. The last point is, methodologically speaking, is to differentiate between determining factor and effective factor. Really, which one determines the situation in the region and which one has, effective role. So that's, and of course, very much is important to remember who is the, Iran has been part of solution always. In the beginning of crisis in Syria, some states there, optimistically or through some wishful thinking, they thought, okay, it's only a matter of weeks. And really, somebody should ask this statement, really, are you a statement that you look at Syria and say, okay, it's only a matter of weeks, some of them in Israel. So really, you should think who is a positive point. And the process of nation building, I emphasize on that. We have to really think about that. And last point, if globalization really, which is a positive, process, positive trend, let's do something that the people of the region also benefit from them. Look at security from, critical way of thinking of strategy of security. The people on the street of the region also, they are human beings. Security of state for the sake of oil, security of Israel, that cannot work. These are fundamental issues. We have to rethink about it. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for longer.